Welcome to Love and Leadership, the podcast that helps you lead with both your head and your heart, plus a bit of humor. I'm Kristen Sharkey, a leadership coach and facilitator.
And I'm Mike Sharkey, a senior living and hospitality executive. We're a couple of leadership nerds who also happen to be a couple.
Join us each week as we share our unfiltered opinions, break down influential books, and interview inspiring guests.
Whether you're a seasoned executive or a rising star, we're here to help you level up your leadership game and amplify your impact.
Hello, and welcome back to Love and Leadership. I'm Kristen.
And I'm Mike.
And today we have a much-awaited LBC episode.
LBC.
On How to Win Friends and Influence People by the very well-known Dale Carnegie. This is a classic book.
It's so good. I love this book. I've read this book, and again, when I say read, I mean listen to in the car, probably 10 times.
Wow, really?
Yeah, maybe not 10, maybe 8, but it's a very positive book. Whoever I have reading it to, he's got a real 1940s radio voice and it's soothing and positive, and it's one of those things that kind of grounds me in what I'm doing. And a lot of times before I'll take a new job, I'll read this book to remember
nice
some really core principles, if you will.
So let's talk a little bit about the background of this book. Dale Carnegie was born...
Not Carnegie Mellon, not Dale, not the Carnegie...
Not Andrew Carnegie.
Not Andrew Carnegie.
Which we'll also talk about.
Yeah, he changed his spelling to associate himself.
But he was born into poverty on a farm in Missouri, and he ended up going to college, getting a job in sales. He started teaching public speaking in 1912, and then from that, the Dale Carnegie course evolved, which became the Dale Carnegie Institute. And yes, as you noted, his birth surname was Carnegie, but it was spelled differently, like Carnegey. But he decided to change it after he gave a lecture at Carnegie Hall in honor of Andrew Carnegie. And he thought it'd be easier to spell and prestige, I'm sure. And he published How to Win Friends and Influence People in 1936, which is kind of crazy. So this book is about to come up on its 90-year anniversary.
So I just looked up the guy that narrates it, and his name is Andrew McMillan. And he is not who you would think. I mean, he's very British, but he looks like he's 32, and he looks like he's in a ska band or something. He's an author and a poet. That makes sense. He's so well-spoken. The enunciation, the pronunciation, it's like the command of the language that you don't hear nowadays. Certainly not from me, but that's part of why I've read the book so many times. But
that's good.
Yeah.
Selling point for the audiobook.
It's so good.
It's hard to overstate just how successful this book is. And it was from the outset. When it debuted, it was already a bestseller.
In 1936.
In 1936. And he died in 1955, so almost 20 years later, from Hodgkin lymphoma. And it had already sold 5 million copies.
So it says it's sold so far over 30 million copies. I don't know if that includes audiobooks, but...
I think that probably includes everything, but yeah, it's one of the best-selling books of all time.
And there's a reason for it. And it's very unlike almost all other leadership books that you will read.
Yeah.
And I avoided, and I heard about this book when I was young, and I didn't read it. You think it's a how to win friends and how to win friends. It's not how to win friends. It's how to succeed in business.
It's how to succeed in business, yeah.
And it doesn't say that, but...
Well, mostly, actually.
Well...
Originally, there was a little more to it than that, but interestingly.
I think these are concepts and principles you can put into practice in just normal relationships, and when you're talking to the barista or whatever, your wife. He has a section in there where he talks about a very grouchy man who he started being nice to his wife, who was a long-suffering 30-year serving him, and she fainted when he started to say nice things to her. He's like, what's happening? So, yeah.
Yes. Well, interesting. I wanted to talk a little bit about editions before we dive into the book, because there's so many of them. The text has really been updated twice. So once in 1981 by Dale Carnegie's wife, and then again in 2022, very recently, by his daughter, Donna. So for the purpose of these notes, I decided to use the...
Dale Carnegie's daughter
Yes.
was still alive in 22?
Yeah.
Wow.
Donna Dale Carnegie is the daughter of Dale Carnegie.
Yeah. She must be like 80, though.
But yeah, I don't know how old she is.
Her middle name is Dale. He named... Oh, my God.
So she's alive, at least as of 2022.
Sure.
And yeah, I can't tell how old she is. So
she's old.
she's not young now.
She's not young.
So yeah, so 2022 was the most recent edition published. I decided to use this edition when doing the notes for this, just because the original is almost 90 years old. There's naturally going to be parts of it that don't age very well. And I thought that would be mostly a distraction.
So which edition have I read? Because I didn't find anything that was particularly anachronistic or racist. He wasn't like, only be nice to white people.
Yeah, I don't know. You'd have to look it up.
Yeah.
And I don't think I think that the worst of it probably came out in the 1981 edition. I don't know. I'm not a scholar. I haven't compared all these. I do really interestingly, it's one of my most prized possessions. I have a 1960s print of this that was my dad's, who passed away about 5 years ago. And it has like all his highlighting and stuff in it. But it is the original, like the original edition, basically. I mean, it's a 1960s print of it. But so I did skim it a little bit, like so the table of contents. There's a couple of things that were interesting that I'll note just for fun. So, I mean, there's definitely a lot of things like this book, and I will say this does come through, I think, even in the newer edition. This book was written for men because business leaders at the time were like almost exclusively men. And
we hadn't had the workforce revolution of World War II.
Yeah. There were a lot of references to men in the titles of the chapters and everything like that. But what was really interesting is the original also had 2 extra sections. This current edition has 4 parts. So the less exciting one was on writing business letters. It's just kind of outdated. But there was also a final section called 7 Rules for Making Your Home Life Happier. It's just basically marriage advice for men in the 1930s. It's all about referencing your wife, as you would expect. I gave it a skim. It honestly was a lot better than I was expecting. I was really
What were you expecting?
Prepared for most of at least the core principles that were like pretty solid advice. But obviously, it's just assuming there's some problems there. I think it's pretty obvious why this was omitted from the later editions.
I read one of his other books too, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living.
Oh yeah, I haven't read that one.
It's okay. I mean, it's like, don't think about stuff. Like, just go zen. I mean, it wasn't that helpful to me. But
Thunk.
What was that?
I don't know. That was on your end.
No, it wasn't.
Oh, I don't know.
This is in bed. We have not had any cat visitors since we added cats to Love and Leadership.
I know.
It's been a very cat-poor podcast.
They know.
They know, man. They
know. Yeah.
It's a very strange life form, the cat.
It really is. But yeah, so I think we're good to go ahead and actually jump.
Really? After that half an hour intro?
It hasn't been that long. It's been like 12 minutes.
God, feels like forever.
Wow.
Andor. Okay, listen. The second season of Andor is live right now. 3 episodes are available on Disney Plus, and this is how much we are devoted to the growth of leadership in. Yeah, and
we're behind on episodes right now, so that's why we're recording the last minute. So
I'm not behind on episodes. Oh, you don't mean podcast episodes.
Yeah,
Andor,
this is how this happened.
If it was like Ahsoka, I wouldn't care, but this is Andor.
I know. But here we are recording.
One way out.
Yet he keeps adding tangents because he can't resist.
Ouch. Is that in your dad's 1966 edition of How to Win Friends and Influence People? Make snarky, slightly passive aggressive.
There's no section for wives. So this book was not originally written for me. So
it's okay. I corrected your spelling of Hodgkins, by the way.
Oh my God.
I love you.
Yeah. Okay. Very
Listen,
important.
We may use this again some.
You say that every time.
Spend a lot of time correcting text messages, I'll tell you. I'm going to stop. I'm going to behave more like
What was that about how to stop worrying and...
Is that in that book?
I
You need to reread this book, my friend. Okay.
Okay. So, as I mentioned, there's 4 parts to this. The structure's a little bit different from most books in that the chapter numbers start over in each section. So there's actually...
They barely had writing in 1936.
4. Oh, yeah, totally. Nobody wrote any books before 1936. Nobody at all. English teachers everywhere are crying. Yeah. No, so there's going to be like 4 chapter 1s. So just know that it's all in the context of the part that we're talking about. So part 1 is fundamental techniques in handling people. And the first chapter is, if you want to gather honey, don't kick over the beehive. And he opens this up by talking about a few notorious criminals from the time.
Yeah, Dillinger. I'm Dillinger.
Yeah. And he talks about like how when asked, none of them blamed themselves for anything.
Yeah.
And he believes that 99 times out of 100, people don't criticize themselves for anything.
He had a good example of Taft, the President Taft, who was responsible for the Teapot Dome scandal. No, I'm trying to remember. Was it Harding? Anyway, at the end, he was like, I don't see how I could have done anything any different.
Oh, yeah.
Really? Nothing. Okay. So that kind of lack of humility is, not what we learned about in Extreme Ownership, how U.S. Navy SEALs lead and win.
Yeah, there are a lot of stories interspersed in this.
It's a lot of stories.
But I think what I liked about this edition is they didn't try to like modernize them. They're all like stories from very different times than you usually read in business books today.
But principles are principles, and truth is truth, and those things should be timeless. And
yeah, for sure.
How we value people and interact with people and treat everybody equally, those things have changed, but like these virtues and principles are a constant. Yeah,
I found it refreshing, honestly, to have so many kind of like historical stories, which of course were not really historical at the time. Most of them had happened.
They were current.
Pretty
He's
recently.
talking about a criminal Dillinger who like shoots cops and is eventually involved in some crazy shootout with the police and leaves a note saying, I'm a gentle soul. I think he murdered like 30 people or something.
Definitely.
So everybody wants to see themselves as good.
Yeah. And where this is going is, he says, criticism is futile because it just puts people on the defensive and it makes them strive to justify themselves. It wounds their pride, it hurts their sense of importance, and it brings up resentment. It does not lead to lasting changes.
Yeah.
And this is definitely a theme throughout this book. He says criticisms are like homing pigeons. They always return home.
And he goes on, people are creatures of emotion, not logic. This is pretty forward thinking for 1936.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But reading this, the way you phrase it is in military theory, we talk about the best approach is the indirect approach. Napoleon was very famous for just attacking straight on, and he had a big ego about it. And it worked for him sometimes because he was a brilliant tactician, but it didn't work a lot, and he suffered some catastrophic defeats. It is much better to flank your enemy or surprise him from behind than it is to try and attack his most fortified position. And for a human, that's the way they think of themselves, their ego, their identity. And, I'm sorry to bring it back to Jocko, but like I learned that from a giant out of central casting Navy SEAL that taking an indirect approach with people to guide them is far more effective than just attacking their weakness or attacking their problem.
Yep, for sure. And then where this leads to, each of these chapters have like a very clear, concise principle that summarizes them, which my brain likes. I like structure.
I think he talked about Abraham Lincoln either in that chapter or later on, and he referred to Abraham Lincoln as one of the best people handlers in history.
Yeah, I remember that from somewhere. He talks about Lincoln a lot.
He talks about Lincoln a lot, and
like Teddy Roosevelt, also very frequent appearance.
Yeah.
But principle number 1 is don't criticize, condemn, or complain.
Period.
For
analytical people, this is very challenging.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Well, a lot of this is challenging.
Yeah. We're programmed to like break things apart and like look for the errors.
There are reasons why, yeah, this came out in the 30s and it's stuff where everybody's still working on. Some of them more than others, depending on the person. But yeah, it's not necessarily our instinctive reactions. So chapter 2, the big secret of dealing with people. And he says there's only one way to get anybody to do anything, by making them want to do it.
That sums up all of leadership. Seriously, you can you can finish the conversation. That is the hard and fast truth.
Yep.
It is like, look, and all of history is replete with the failures of religions and governments and ideologies and cults that try and force people into a way of thinking or action that does not come from within. You know, look at in the time Prohibition, right? You got a lot of alcohol. People still drank because they wanted to drink. Nowadays, some drugs are legal. Some drugs are. It doesn't stop anybody. And in fact, like making alcohol illegal had a different reaction. It gave organized crime a forever foothold in the United States. And it exists today. You can make cocaine illegal, but what do you get? You get narcos. You get the Colombian cartel. So you can't force anybody to do anything. Only for a very short time and only while you're watching them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And he says, we all have a desire for a feeling of importance. This is one of the chief distinguishing differences between humans and animals.
Again, you can end the teachings right here.
Yeah. One I particularly like this, like how you get your feeling of importance determines your character.
Sure.
What are you willing to do?
And I get my feeling of importance from pleasing people, from serving people. When I make someone happy, that gives me a sense of importance. Mm-hmm. And that's my ego too.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm aware of that. Like I've had many philosophical discussions with people who say there's no such thing as selflessness, that Mother Teresa and all the Buddha, that they get some sort of feeling of importance from helping others. And okay, that might be true. But that I still think is better than getting your sense of importance from beating or conquering or dominating other people.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
I could be wrong. I might be wrong. It's still ego. But, you know.
I mean.
I don't get my sense of importance from stepping on other people's faces.
Exactly.
And
a lot of people do.
A lot of people do. And in the martial arts too, they talk about jiu-jitsu. Oh, it's a great, humbling. Maybe. But if you happen to have a big ego and you wind up also being very good at it through either discipline or you have to have some talents. And you can just, I've seen it a lot. Mm-hmm. You know, they get off on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. And Charles Schwab is another one of the common appearances in this book. But he was the first, or at least one of the first Americans to be paid a salary of more than $1 million a year in 1921, which I looked up just now. I think it's about 18 million.
Yeah.
Now.
Oh, it's probably more than. There was a funny quote in there. I don't know. I think he got to interview him at one point, and Dale asked Charles Schwab, like, "How did you command such a salary?" And Charles went, "Hard work." And Dale's like, "Don't be funny." And I was like, thank you for telling the truth that hard work is not necessarily in and of itself how you get success.
Yeah. Well, he ultimately credited it to his ability to dealing with
people.
His ability to deal with people. Yeah.
He said be hearty in your approbations and lavish in your praise.
Yeah. He said the best way to develop the best in a person is by appreciation and encouragement. Nothing kills the ambitions of a person like criticism from superiors.
That's so true. He said, I'm loath to criticize, but I say all the good I see.
Yeah.
And you were worried that I wasn't going to read this book to do this.
You still you remember
I was like,
so much of it.
I was like, don't worry.
I was like, I'll do the notes because it's been a bit since I read it.
Yeah, that's good.
So, yeah.
But there's some old school language for you too, approbations.
Oh yeah, there's some.
I love it.
There's some great old school language in here. Still, it's funny, but yeah, he also points out the difference between appreciation and flattery, which is important, and this comes back later in the book too. Flattery is insincere, selfish, and condemned. Appreciation is sincere, from the heart, selfish, and admired. So people want appreciation. They don't want flattery.
That's challenging. It is challenging, but I think as a leader, at some point, you'll very quickly realize you really need other people to be successful in your roles. And it can be a little selfish, but you can say all the good that you see because they're helping you accomplish your very complicated job. And so thank you for doing that. People will feel that that is not empty. That is not, everybody likes that. Somewhere in here, he says the sweetest sound to any person is their own name.
Yep. He gets into that.
Oh, God,
later
it's
on.
so true.
So true.
It's so true.
So yeah, principle number 2, give honest and sincere appreciation. And then the third and final chapter of this part, these are kind of like the fundamental principles. It's a very long chapter title. He who can do this has the whole world with him. He who cannot walks a lonely way. You know.
It's very...
It's a little dramatic.
It's a little dramatic. It's a little biblical.
Mr. Carnegie.
Yeah.
But
well, it's 1936.
yes. But the only way to influence people is to talk about what they want, not what you want, and show them how to get it.
Yeah.
And every act you've performed since the day you were born was because you wanted something.
Yeah.
Just so true. I mean, we go to this in improv. It's like a way to increase the stakes in a scene and just make it better is to like want something. So that is the source of human behavior. And he talks about his own story when he was running a ballroom in a hotel for lectures, and they all of a sudden increased the rent by 3 times. And he, instead of just like arguing with them about this, being Dale Carnegie, he wrote them a pros and cons list of doing this. And in the cons, he included not only the loss in revenue from all of his business, but also he pointed out that the people his lectures attracted were in the hotel's target market. And they only increased it 50% instead of like 300 as a result of that. He also quotes Henry Ford, if there is any one secret of success, it lies in the ability to get the other person's point of view and see things from that person's angle as well as from your own. And the best way to motivate someone to do something for you is to show them how it would benefit them as well. So, very true.
I don't know if Jocko's read this book, but a lot of that stuff has found its way into like modern, the military talk that he explains things to his team, right? Like he wants them to understand the big picture. He wants them to understand their part in it.
These become like core principles of selling too. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, principle number 3, some old-timey language.
Arousing the other person, an eager want.
Yes.
Okay, Jedediah.
Just rolls off the tongue.
It rolls right off the
language,
tongue.
Yeah.
It's like a Dust Bowl kind of thing going on here.
Yes. So that is part 1. Part 2 is 6 ways to make people like you. So there's another 6 chapters and 6 principles that go with them in this part. So chapter 1, do this and you'll be welcome anywhere. He says, you can make more friends in 2 months by becoming interested in people than you can in 2 years by trying to get people interested in you.
Yeah.
And one can win the attention, time, and cooperation of even the most sought after people by becoming genuinely interested in them.
Even the famous are moved by true.
Yeah. Well, because
I won't say flattery, but like
appreciation versus flattery to some extent. It's like the sincerity aspect, right? Yeah. People always want something from them. Yeah. So if you show actual genuine interest, it stands out.
This is dating advice I got too. It's like, don't talk, just ask girls questions. No one's ever come away from a date going, yeah, just let me talk about myself too much.
For sure.
No one said that ever.
Yeah, I think I've noted that in places too. I'm like, this is also totally dating advice. Timeless dating advice.
How to win friends.
Yeah.
And influence people. Yeah.
And he talks about how he would get like very prominent people like FDR to come speak for his students by writing them letters of deep admiration. And also just acknowledging they didn't have time to create a whole lecture. So he would attach a list of questions about them and their methods of work that they could answer.
Smart.
As part of the lecture. Super smart on many levels.
Yeah.
But yeah, all of us like people who admire us. This is a thing. And he recommends finding out people's birthdays and remembering them.
He talked about one guy, one politician, I can't remember who it was, but it was like rumored he could remember like 10,000 people's names.
Mm-hmm.
And then he asked him, he's like, no, it's 50,000.
Yeah. Yep.
I remember Napoleon was famous for that.
Yeah, he references Napoleon a lot in this book too.
Well, he was very close to that time period. Oh, God.
Yes. History. Yes.
No, he wasn't. It was almost 100 years.
It wasn't quite.
It wasn't quite. No, but he was probably more
but a lot
famous.
closer than we are.
Yeah, he was probably more famous in that day than he is now.
Yeah.
The Ridley Scott debacle notwithstanding.
But yeah, I guess I even noted in my notes for this chapter, I'm like, this reminds me of my approach when I was dating. Was just taking genuine interest in people and being like...
Everybody loves to talk about themselves.
Yeah, well, and I figured like I genuinely like learning about people. I was like, I can talk to anybody for 45 minutes, pretty much. So just by being genuinely interested in them. So that was my approach. It definitely applies. So principle 1 is become genuinely interested in other people.
Don't underestimate the impact of a smile. I had someone who I later probably did not think this of me, but they said I had resting happy face.
Oh,
I know.
Oh,
And then
that's an adorable compliment.
it is, and then I 86 them.
What?
But that was indirect too. Like they were doing something not right. This group was doing something really bad, and we won't go into details for legal reasons. They did not. I don't think they saw that coming. They saw me as, oh, he's very happy. He's probably a simpleton, and they found out different. But that's indirect.
Okay. So that was flattery.
I think they were
more than appreciation.
Well, they probably appreciated that. They're like, oh, here's somebody happy that we can work with.
But they're also like, how can I use this? Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, you can. I am, because I will tell you, I think I read this book really at one point when I was with Kino, and I saw so many of the things that... You
should explain who Kino is.
Well, Kino was the general... I mean, if you've... Okay, I don't know.
Not everybody's listened all the way back.
Okay, Kino is an amazing person. He was the general manager of the Hyatt that I worked at when I moved to San Francisco. I was his AGM, assistant general manager. Imagine he's a general, I'm a colonel, right? And so I'm carrying out his orders and whatever. But Kino I learned so much from him. And one of the things I learned was that you don't have to be an autocratic kind of traditional style leader to get really good results. He was very nice to everybody. He was very friendly. He was gregarious. He was outgoing. He did tell me he wasn't like that before COVID. Like he was like, just stay in his office and, old school observes. But so many of the principles and boundaries for leaders and this book, I found him doing naturally. And I know he didn't read these books. 100%. I don't know the man's ever read a leadership book, but he just in his character, he's developed a lot of these techniques and the indirect approach, the really saying nice. He would praise lots and lots of people, and he would somehow still manage to tell you what you were doing wrong without it coming out like that. He's at the top of his field, and he's doing it without an iron fist. There's a Chinese saying, steel wrapped in silk. That's what they call like Qigong, Tai Chi practices. Like your body doesn't get hard in the way that like Bruce Lee looks or like, military guys. But inside the bones get very strong, the internal stuff, and you can break bricks and things like that. That's not from just the hardening of the outer side. It's the inside that becomes supernaturally strong.
Nice.
Steel wrapped in silk.
Well, that gets into chapter 2, a simple way to make a good first impression, which is really talking about smiling. The principle for this chapter is smile. And he talks about how the effect of a smile is powerful, even when it's unseen. And I've heard the advice so many times, like when you're on the phone, smile.
Oh, we say that.
Yeah.
You can hear a smile.
Because your smile comes through your voice. It does.
Totally does.
It does. I also like this. You must have a good time meeting people if you expect them to have a good time meeting you. And he also says, if you don't feel like smiling, just force yourself to smile first.
I don't agree with that, but...
I do, actually, because it does influence your mood.
Well, I think you can... Who was it? I think it was like Voltaire or something. I said that. Okay. It was Voltaire. Yes.
Wow.
Okay. So the most important decision you will ever make is to be in a good mood. And there was a point in my life when I suffered from depression and I had a lot of different trauma and things like that. And there was many times that I could not make that choice. But at some point in my late 40s, I started being able to make that choice. And I think it was again at the Hyatt. And Kino kind of helped me go from being a student of leadership to an actual leader, where I would put aside all the details and come in with a very positive, forward-moving attitude because I knew everybody else needed to see that. And I would get my coffee and I would 6 espressos and I would come in and I would just go around and buff people up or whatever. And that not my normal style at all. But there is a moment in you can start to choose that.
Yep.
And that I agree. So that I don't want to fake a smile, but there's a choice there.
Yeah. I mean, I do think I don't know it off the top of my, and Dale Carnegie certainly didn't have it at this point. I think there is some science backing up.
There is.
Smiling and the effect on your mood. But
I'm a Cancer. We don't do that. Like, where's that meme with the cat? And it's, I hate this. I hate everyone. This is annoying. I hope I'm hiding it well. And the face is like, scrunched up. I personally can't do that. I have to get into that actual frame of mind. But for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. I mean, basically it comes down to act as if you are already happy, and that will tend to make you happy. And this along the same topic. Everyone in the world is seeking happiness, and there is one sure way to find it: by controlling your own thoughts. Happiness depends on inner conditions, not outward ones.
I don't agree with the word control. I think it's a deeper process than controlling.
Yeah, maybe control isn't right, but still, this is pretty forward thinking.
No, 100%. I'm splitting hairs here. I'm splitting hairs for sure.
There's more stuff to split hairs about in this as we get deeper in, but it's generally, I feel like it's generally right.
The concepts are so good.
Yeah. Chapter 3, if you don't do this, you are headed for trouble. His chapter titles are so funny. They're they're like warnings. But he talks about how Jim Farley, who was FDR's campaign manager,
that's the guy with the 50,000 names.
Yes, this is the one here. Yeah. And he built an entire system for remembering names.
Yeah.
And he would meet people on the campaign trail and just always follow up with them with personal letters, which is crazy.
Well, we do that in my business now. After someone tours, well, she better be. She's supposed to write people like that.
I mean, yeah.
It's a lot of work, but she'll write out like a handwritten thank you note. It's so meaningful.
Yeah, for sure.
You know? Or when you check into a hotel, if you're up VIP, you'll get a handwritten note from, the GM, or thanks for staying with us, or the whole team will thank you for being here.
Yep.
I do it we have a guest suite. We had a VIP staying last week, a regional sales guy, and I put his name on the door. I was like, welcome, Tim. And he noticed all of that,
Mm-hmm.
When I interviewed for this job in the parking is a disaster, but I had my own spot. They told me which spot, and there was a sign that said Michael Sharkey in the spot. Yeah. And I was like, that is a nice touch.
That goes a long way.
And then you forgive mistakes that maybe you wouldn't maybe forgive. It's like, everybody likes that.
Oh, yeah. Well, the average person is more interested in their own name than in all the other names on earth put together.
He said something in there about you're more interested in your own toothache than you are about a famine in another part of the world. And I was like, that is unfortunately
true. Also a little liberating when you figure it out.
Yeah.
Because you realize that not everybody is paying attention to things about you like you are.
Oh, they're not.
At all.
They're not. I'm so worried about how my hair is sitting, and they're not absorbing.
Nobody cares.
Nobody cares. You're on your own there, sir.
Yep. But kind of back to names specifically. He says, remember somebody's name and write it accurately, and you have delivered a very effective compliment, which is an interesting way to put it. Forget it or misspell it, and you have placed yourself at a sharp disadvantage.
That was so smart. And I'm in businesses where there's a lot of different ethnicities, and I will ask people, I'll first of all hunch over a little bit to lower myself, and I'll be like, that's an interesting name. How do you spell that?
Yeah, that's so smart.
It's smart. And people will usually, and they're used to being mispronounced, or there's a whole probably Instagram handle of Starbucks cups that gone wrong.
Yeah.
But if you ask them, how do you spell that? Can you tell me about that? I don't know. I think that's people appreciate that.
For sure. Yeah, no, this is something I've always been very intentional about spelling people's names correctly. It's something I triple check on emails in general, but I have deep insecurities around remembering people's names. I think it's partly an auditory processing thing.
I'm not great at
from
it.
ADHD.
I remember what you want to drink. Like I can tell you a decade later what a regular guest at a restaurant, if they liked iced tea or they wanted lemon in the water, or did they not want orange things on their plate, or did they not eat salt? But sometimes I forget names.
Yeah, it's hard. I have to be extremely intentional about it, and it's still a challenge for me. But
sincerity goes a long way.
It does, yes.
Yeah.
For
I'm
sure.
so sorry. I'm an idiot. Please, can you tell me your name one more time? We get that in jiu-jitsu. It's a lot. It's very, you're trying to kill each other, and you can go weeks and months, and you're rolling with people, and it's like, I'm so sorry. I don't remember your name. I know you like to Kimura the shit out of me, but like, is it Bob, Robert? I fucking don't remember.
Yeah.
The struggle is real.
I also thought it interesting. He's talked about like one of Andrew Carnegie's business secrets was he would name things after the people he wanted to influence, or offer to name something after them if they wanted their support.
Oh God, where he talks about giving people a standard to live up to. That is, or it's one of the most genius techniques of all time.
It's super smart. Yeah.
We're in a society where everybody is just ripping each other down for the smallest offenses or the smallest iniquities, and instead give people a reputation to live up to, and they will live up to it.
Yep.
And Kino did that to me. He's, I know you're going to get this. I know you'll figure that out. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, you have more confidence in me than I have. And I was like, you know what? Maybe he's right. And I went and figured stuff out.
Yeah. And he lists like multiple leaders, FDR, Andrew Carnegie, and others who made a point of remembering the names of frontline workers, mechanics, like everybody they encountered, and how important it is. So the principle number 3 for this, you said already earlier, is remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language.
So, like, it's so underestimated.
It's true. Yeah. Yep. So chapter 4, an easy way to become a good conversationalist. And I love this chapter, but many people fail to make a favorable impression because they don't listen attentively. They're too concerned with what they're going to say next. This is very in line with the work I do. And he says, if you want to make people shun you, a good recipe for that is never listen to anyone for long, talk incessantly about yourself, and interrupt the person in the middle of a sentence to share your idea.
Ouch.
To be interesting, be interested. And I really love this. I find it interesting that I do a lot of like talks and workshops and stuff. And of the concepts I share, one of the ones that gets the most feedback or people will come up to me and talk about it with me is the 3 levels of listening, which I've talked about on this podcast before. I can link to maybe one of those episodes, but it's always just struck me that it's such a simple thing. Dale Carnegie was writing about it like 90 years ago, but it's something we all struggle with and takes a lot of conscious effort. So he also recommends like asking questions the other person will enjoy answering, encourage them to talk about themselves and their accomplishments. And again, this is kind of back to what we said under names. The people you're talking to are 100 times more interested in themselves and their wants and problems than they are in you and your problems. 100 times more.
Yeah, they're you're more interested in your own toothache than you are a famine somewhere else in the world. Oh, it's rough to admit, but it's true, man.
Yeah. So principle number 4 is be a good listener, encourage others to talk about themselves. Also great dating advice. Like much of this. So 2 more chapters in this part. Again,
I like how at the end he has one like summation of the principle.
Yeah, I like it. I love it.
Yeah.
My brain loves it.
Your brain loves it. Your brain is so interesting. It's like a separate person. It has a will of its own.
Something like that.
Yeah, it's like a cat. You can herd it carefully and somewhat unsuccessfully, but you can't control it.
So finishing up the 6 ways to get people to like you. So chapter 5 of this is how to interest people. And Teddy Roosevelt, a frequent appearance in this book, whenever he expected a visitor, he would stay up late the night before reading up on a subject that he knew his guest was most interested in. He says, the royal road to a person's heart is to talk about the things he or she treasures most. And when you think of really great conversationalists, you enjoy their company because they talk in terms of your interest and your opinions. So that's the principle from this, is talk in terms of the other person's interest.
He has some good letters with like a shipping company and the way they're like, you need to get your trucks here on time. And nobody listens, but when they puts it in terms of how it will benefit them, if your trucks get here earlier, we're going to be able to pay more attention to them. You're going to get your freight unloaded quicker within 1 day and not wait 2 days. And he does the same thing when he's talking to the hotel. He gives a whole list. Here are the benefits that will accrue to you if you raise my rent 3 times. He's like, first of all, you'll be able to collect more rent because I can't pay it, and that will free up the ballroom. This is actually, it's a benefit to you, and that's like a whole department of revenue management. We're raising it to the point that we're going to reduce our occupancy, but the people staying are going to pay more. Okay, if that's your plan, good plan. It's always put in people's terms that takes into account their position and perspective.
Yep. And this is true of so many things. It's like, rather than telling your sob story or making it all about how this impacts you, like put it in terms of how it will benefit them in general when you want something from somebody. Oh. And then lastly, in this section, chapter 6, how to make people like you instantly. And he says there's one all-important law of human conduct. Always make the other person feel important. And this is kind of re-echoing some of the stuff he talked about in the first section, but he talks a lot about the golden rule in this chapter. I prefer the platinum rule, which Amira Barger talked about on our interview with her, so you can check that out if you want to hear more, but treating others the way they want to be treated.
I don't remember the platinum rule. I was probably listening to respond rather than listening to listen.
Well, we've done a lot of interviews, but that stuck with me. As opposed to the golden rule of treat people the way you want to be treated.
I think that's changed during my lifetime. When I was entering the business world, it was like, treat everyone the same, treat people the way you would want to be treated. And now it's not everybody wants to be treated like you. They might want something completely different.
Yeah, so then he recommends using like little phrases like, I'm sorry to trouble you. Would you be so kind as to? Would you mind?
Yeah.
Like he says, these oil the cogs of the monotonous grind of everyday life.
Oh, it's so true.
Yes. He also said, like, almost all the people you meet feel they're superior to you in some way. And a sure path to their hearts is to let them realize in some subtle way that you recognize their importance sincerely. No matter how important someone is, no one is immune to the pleasure of someone taking interest in you as a person.
That's genius.
Yeah. So the principle from this is make the other person feel important and do it sincerely.
Yeah.
The sincerity is really emphasized throughout this book, and even says towards the end of it, he's like, all of these principles only work if you're doing them genuinely, which may not always be true, but I think the intention is there. So that's part 2. So part 3 is how to win people to your way of thinking. So now we're getting into the influence part of this. So chapter 1, you can't win an argument. If you lose...
Facebook says you're wrong.
Does it though? Because is anybody winning those comment threads?
I don't know, man. It's very scary.
I don't think so.
It's very, very demoralizing to look at this stuff nowadays.
People need to read this, clearly.
People need to read something other than Fox News or CNN.
Yeah.
Pick up a good book.
TikTok, social media,
Jeez.
But yeah, he says if you lose an argument, you lose it. If you win it, you also lose it.
But we saw that in Unreasonable Hospitality too, where the guy ordered a medium rare steak and the waiter's like, it is medium rare. You're right, but you're wrong because now you've lost that customer or you've embarrassed him.
You've made the other person feel inferior. You've hurt their pride, something like that.
As a good example, he's at the party. He's at a cocktail party, and he corrects somebody who thinks something is from the Bible. And it's not from the Bible. It's from Shakespeare. And Dale corrects him. Oh, no, that's from... And his friend kicks him under the table. And his friend is a Shakespeare expert, so he doesn't understand. And later he's like, okay, so you won that argument. You were right. But did you further your cause of winning friends and influencing people? No, you didn't. You made an enemy.
Yeah.
Or you one-upped that guy. Congratulations. Nobody's keeping score.
Yep. Yeah. No, I mean, I think in Unreasonable Hospitality, it's do you want to be right or do you want to win? I've also heard,
I say that all the time.
Yeah. Or do you want to be right or do you want to be married is another one I hear.
Ouch. Okay, that's aggressive. Okay, we'll talk later.
I mean, I'm probably the most guilty of that, so.
Oh, you are. You're so stubborn. It was like 2 years in till I got you to admit that you were stubborn.
Really?
Oh my God, yes. You do. I don't know if you do see yourself as stubborn, but
no, I totally know I'm stubborn.
Oh, you do? You were so stubborn that you wouldn't admit that you were stubborn.
Maybe not in that particular
Mama
situation.
Brun it wasn't until I started to observe, I love you, Mama Brun, until I started to observe your mom. And I was like, oh,
yeah,
it's a stubborn thing in their family, and they don't even know they're doing it.
You never met my maternal grandmother, but it all makes sense. But yes, so this is all true. I like this quote too. A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still.
Back to cannot control anyone at all.
Yep.
Yeah, you can lead them, but you can't force them. At least not for long.
Yep.
God, if we could learn one lesson as a people as you met, like that would be it.
Just like print this chapter.
Just that saying, you cannot force anyone to do anything. You can only lead them to do what they want to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And to get them to want to do it, you must show them why it is in their best interests. Not because this is why there's all this self-righteousness and false piety and everybody's God is fighting another God. Really? Really? You think you're so right? You're willing to go to war with somebody else who also... Yeah, apparently we are.
Yeah, plenty of historical examples of that.
Oh my God.
And not so historical examples.
Don't get it.
Yeah.
Don't get it.
Just to bring it back to the cats, since they refuse to make appearances these days. I remember you telling me early on, you're like, you can't force them to do anything.
Nope.
But you can influence them.
You can influence their behavior.
It's much like people.
Subtly. And only a little bit.
Yeah.
And only if they want to.
But they still have to kind of want to do it. Yeah. Yeah. He also prints...
It's a 10-pound creature that can ruin your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Very effectively.
Scream, yell, all you want. Cannot make them do what you want.
No. They are stubborn creatures. The other thing he puts in this chapter, he prints... This is from an article he pulled them from, but I actually like it. It's like how to keep a disagreement from turning into an argument. Welcome the disagreement. Like, disagreement is not inherently bad. Distrust your first impression, because our first response is usually going to be defensive. Control your temper. I like this. You can measure the size of a person by what makes them angry. Yeah.
Sure.
Listen first and let them finish. Try to build bridges of understanding. Look for areas of agreement. Be honest. Look for areas where you can admit error and say so. Promise to think over your opponent's ideas and study them carefully and mean it. Thank your opponent sincerely for their interest and postpone action to give both sides time to think through the problem. So, yeah, I like these. And the principle for this is the only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it. Mm-hmm. So, chapter 2, a sure way of making enemies and how to avoid it. So it says, when you think someone is wrong, never start with, I'm going to prove this to you. So it's the equivalent of saying you're smarter than them. And it instinctively makes them want to battle with you before you even start talking. If you're going to prove anything, don't let them know it. Do it so subtly that no one will feel you're doing it. And I think this is part of this where people can kind of use this for evil if they're really good at it. But But
leadership and manipulation are very similar.
Yeah.
It's the intention and the purpose.
That's true of many of the principles in this. But if a person makes a statement you think or know is wrong, he says, start with, I thought otherwise, but I may be wrong. I frequently am.
I love that. I use that. I might be wrong. I'm often wrong.
I try to use that too, because you're not saying, oh, I am wrong, but you're saying I could be wrong. I might be wrong.
It's kind of disarming too.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody thinks, if you watch the Facebook comments, it's I'm right, 100% right. My view is right. My people are the people that share my view are right, and everyone else is completely wrong. Well, there's no nuance. There's no gray. It's all black and white. Well, okay, probably not, but
Yep.
I might be wrong. I frequently am.
Yeah, you'll never get into trouble by admitting that you may be wrong.
Chris Voss had that too.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, when he went to Canada illegally, he's like, bless me, Father, for I have sinned.
Yeah, there's a lot of Chris Voss
Sure.
similarities in here.
Because
I'm sure he was influenced by this.
I don't know if you read who knows? He never mentions it, but like his whole thing is winning friends and influencing people.
Yeah, it's all, yeah.
Yeah,
it's all influence.
He tells people, hey, I'm an asshole. Okay, I'm sorry, I am a jerk. And that's disarming when you start with that. People are like, no, you're not an asshole. Okay.
Yep.
They'll disagree with you.
Yep.
Oh, I'm probably coming too strong with this comment. The reaction is, no, it's not too strong. It's okay. Makes sense.
Yep. And he says Ben Franklin had a role to avoid directly contradicting others, and he would use language like, this gets very old-timey. Not I imagine, but I conceive or I apprehend. Instead of words that show a fixed opinion, like certainly or undoubtedly. But yeah, it's like some language softening. So principle number 2 is show respect for the other person's opinions and never say you're wrong.
He tells the story of Lincoln, how Lincoln in the first part of his life was very confrontational and he almost got in a duel. And then at some point he had a change of heart. And even though he was almost too gentle with the generals of the Civil War, who were mostly beyond incompetent, and he didn't yell and scream and throw things in a Gordon Ramsay kind of way, and he took a very like indirect, soft approach to influence people in a different way.
Yep. So chapter 3, if you're wrong, admit it.
No, I won't.
This is something I'm perfect at, obviously.
You're so bad at this, to be honest.
I don't want to be.
I know, but it's so hard to get an admission of guilt or an apology out of you.
I don't know why it's so hard.
I love you. I don't know why it is so hard. I don't know why.
But
I know you know.
Yeah.
I know you know.
But the idea of this is
she's turning red.
If you know you're going to be rebuked anyway, it's better to beat the other person to it.
For sure.
Say all the criticism you know the other person is thinking and say it before they have a chance to say it.
Accusation audit from Never Split the Difference.
Yeah. I also put this is very Chris Voss.
It's very Chris Voss.
Yep.
With one too many S's on Chris's.
Oh my God. Wait, what was this about correcting? And do you want to be right or do you
want to be married? I'm tired. Trying to record after work is not ideal.
I know. It's not ideal, but I was gone this weekend, so here we are.
Yeah, with your Broadway extravaganza.
I did a Broadway trip with my mom.
Oh my God,
yeah.
That sounds like the definition of like purgatory.
You're like, wow, that all sounds terrible.
It all sounds awful.
Yep, you didn't have to go, so. Yep. But yeah, he says there's a certain degree of satisfaction in having the courage to admit one's errors. It not only clears the guilt and defensiveness, but often helps solve the problem created by the error. And he notes the proverb, by fighting, you never get enough, but by yielding, you get more than you expected. So principle number 3, if you are wrong, admit it quickly and emphatically. So chapter 4, a drop of honey. This is short and simple. This is like reiterating back to the very first principle, but it quotes Abe Lincoln, a drop of honey catches more flies than a gallon of gall.
I had to look that up. I don't remember what that is. It's disgusting, right?
I did. Yeah, I don't know either. But obviously we have a lot of modern variations of this statement. The whole idea, the whole principle for this is begin in a friendly way.
Begin in a friendly way is very smart. That's what I mean, Kino is like very friendly. Yeah.
Yep. And then the next one is interestingly different from what Chris Voss says. This is kind of a more like typical sales script approach, but chapter 5 is get the other person saying yes, yes immediately. So he says, don't start with the things you differ on. Begin by emphasizing the things on which you agree on. Get the other person saying yes and try to keep them from saying no. Which is different from Chris Voss,
it is.
kind of,
I don't know. It's kind of, but it's yeah.
Yeah. Dale Carnegie says when you have said no, all your pride of personality demands that you remain consistent with yourself. So he talks about this Socratic method of asking gentle questions with which your opponent will have to agree with until you have an armful of yeses. Like the Chinese proverb, he who treads softly goes far. So I think this is a little debatable. I think some of this depends on the situation. I agree more with Chris Voss that you can't really trick somebody into saying yes by just getting them to say yes to a lot of things. It has to be related to it, but
yeah,
it's interesting. So principle 5, get the other person saying yes, yes immediately. And then chapter 6, the safety valve and handling complaints. So most people who are trying to win others to their way of thinking do too much talking. You should actually let the other people talk themselves out and don't interrupt them, no matter how much you disagree. Listen patiently with an open mind. Be sincere, ask questions, and encourage them to express their ideas fully. And
let's see you say that name.
Yeah, right. I know. There's a couple of French names in here where it's like,
Philosopher La Roche.
I like this quote.
Called.
Philosopher La Rochefoucauld. Yeah, I can't do any better. But the quote is, if you want enemies, excel your friends. But if you want friends, let your friends excel you. This is, even our friends would much rather talk to us about their achievements than listen to us boast about ours. It's better to be modest and minimize our achievements.
Yeah, very, very un-Western.
Very, yes. Yeah. So it's basically let the other person do a great deal of the talking. And I think he talks about this in the context of like complaints too, like give people really a chance to let it all out and listen to them. And then chapter 7, how to get cooperation. So Teddy Roosevelt, he talks about when he was the governor of New York, he kept on terms with his political bosses, despite putting through a lot of reforms that they bitterly disliked. And his tactic was like when he would have an important office open up, he would ask them for a recommendation. And usually he would reject the first 3, but by the 4th suggestion, they would name somebody he agreed with. And then he would appoint this person and then let them take the credit for it.
Teddy Roosevelt.
Yep. Yeah, and this is
he was a tough guy too, like.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he got shot at a campaign event and finished the event.
He also, like, his wife and his mom died, on the same day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually a tough dude.
He went through some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But this principle is let the other person feel that the idea is theirs.
Which is genius if you know how to do it.
If you know how to do it. Yeah. And this doesn't really get into how do you do that.
Yeah. I mean, that's a whole, probably there's books on that. I need to read that.
There's an art. I need to read it as well. Yeah. But the next one is a formula that will work wonders for you. It says there is a reason why the other person thinks and acts as they do. Ferret out that reason and you have the key to their actions and maybe to their personality. And try to honestly put yourself in their place. Like, how would I feel if I were in their shoes?
Yeah, Lincoln taught his wife is like condemning the Southerners, and Lincoln said something like, don't condemn them. They are exactly what we would be if we grew up in similar circumstances. Yeah. I think that's very profound. He's not agreeing with their position. He knows that they're,
Yep, but understand how
they got there, and that's a level of tolerance that we could probably benefit from.
We could, yeah.
Yeah. I'm kind of out of patience, personally. I'm kind of out of patience with this. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's hard, but it does help, I think, when you understand the other person's perspective, even if you don't agree with it. It's not the same thing as agreeing with it. But yeah, he actually says if you only get one thing from this book, let it be this. Like an increased affinity to think always of the other person's POV and see things from it as well as your own may prove to be one of the biggest stepping stones of your career. So the principle in summary is try to honestly see things from the other person's point of view.
Yeah. That's, I mean, empathy too, right?
Yeah.
That's it.
I talk about this with my levels of listening too. Immersive listening is literally like what distinguishes it is you're focused entirely on understanding the other person's perspective and view and feelings. And then you can proceed from there. So chapter 9, what everybody wants. So he says that there's a magic phrase that will stop arguments, eliminate ill feelings, create goodwill, and make the other person listen attentively, which is, I don't blame you one iota for feeling as you do. If I were you, I would undoubtedly feel just as you do.
Yeah, that's where the Lincoln thing is. I'm not organized.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's all related. But yeah, he says 3/4 of the people you meet are hungering and thirsting for sympathy. Give it to them and they will love you. And I did want to note, he names all of this as sympathy in this chapter. I think he's really more getting at what we would think of today as empathy.
Yeah, understanding.
Yeah, because really the difference between like how we
I don't
see
think
them
they
today,
had that in the 30s.
I don't think so either. But
This is before World War II.
yeah, because now sympathy, what we mean by it now is more like feeling sorry for someone's misfortune. So it's almost more like pity. You're feeling sorry for them versus empathy is understanding and sharing their feelings. So you're like feeling with them. So I think this is more what he's getting at. It's just the language wasn't there. But he gives an example of, and I included this because I thought it was funny with your hotel background, but an escalator repairman who has to inform a hotel manager that their escalator is going to be shut down for the day for repairs. And of course, the hotel manager is like, we can only have it shut down for 2 hours maximum. This is like a premium hotel. And he affirmed the hotel manager's feelings. And he explained that if they don't do an 8-hour shutdown now, it's probably going to result in a shutdown several days later by damaging it. And ultimately, the hotel manager understood. So principle 9, be sympathetic, or we would say empathetic, with the other person's ideas and desires. Chapter 10, an appeal that everybody likes. So a person usually has 2 reasons for doing a thing. One that sounds good and the real one.
Oh my God, that hurts.
Oh, yeah. These are some harsh truths about humanity. But he says, in order to change people, appeal to the nobler motives.
Sure. This is where he talks about giving people a fine reputation to live up to. You're excellent at that. I'm sure you're going to get that.
Though actually, that comes back in the last chapter too.
Oh, okay.
But it's similar, right? Like so he gives an example of this. So like John D. Rockefeller wanted photographers, whatever the equivalent of paparazzi was at that point, to stop taking photographs of his children. And he appealed to them not by saying, like, I want you to stop doing this, but by pointing out that, like, many of them had children themselves, and they would know that it wasn't good for youngsters to get too much publicity. So it's, like, appealing to, like, the nobler motive, the higher motive.
We don't care about that anymore. That stopped working in the 60s.
I mean, I don't know. That's an interesting...
In the 60s, the press didn't report on JFK's many torrid affairs.
Oh, you mean like the paparazzi thing?
Well, I just mean nowadays people, I feel, have degenerated into unabated, unrepentant self-interests.
Yeah.
And a gotcha, as if everything's a fight for some kind of supremacy. It's very depressing.
Yeah, there is an argument that this is less effective now than it was in the 30s, for sure.
Yeah, I don't see that being super effective.
Yeah. Yep, well, that's fair. We don't agree with 100% of it.
I mean, the thing is, he's into human nature. You know, he's got he's got an understanding of psychology that's 50 years ahead of where he should be. Mm-hmm. You know, how he got that, I don't know.
Yeah.
He did. I think he did say he read like 50 Lincoln biographies or something like that. So he made a real world study of a lot of like influential people, leaders.
Yep, he did. Yeah, a lot of this is, you can tell he's studied many other people and read books. So chapter 11, the movies do it, advertisers do it, why don't you do it? And it's too much talk is tiresome, ineffective. People like dramatic action. So use dramatization and showmanship when presenting your ideas.
Like Batman.
I mean, I think...
What is it? It's like theatricality.
Yeah.
It works, though.
It works. It still works. I think it looks different now, obviously. I hear like death by PowerPoint, like being more creative about the way you engage people when you're presenting things.
A meme today, like the entire global economy is propped up by Microsoft Excel. Like it all depends on Excel.
I mean, it's
kind of true.
Probably not wrong.
Oh, Excel is the one highly functioning Microsoft product. I guess PowerPoint's probably okay. I don't really use it. Word's a piece of... And Outlook... Oh, why is the search so bad?
Right, we could do a whole episode on complaining about Microsoft.
Yeah, but we all use Outlook all the time. And you're like, can I search for a PDF that I saw yesterday? Outlook's like, sorry, bro, you had your chance.
I haven't used Outlook in probably like...
Oh, it's so
15
painful.
years.
Yeah, that's why you look happy.
Maybe a little less, maybe a little more recent than that, but not. It's been at least a decade.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, social media is bad for health, for mental health, but what about Teams?
Yeah. Yes. So the final chapter of this part on about influencing people, basically, when nothing else works, try this. And he quotes Charles Schwab. The way to get things done is to stimulate competition. I do not mean in a sordid money-getting way, but in the desire to excel.
Yeah, Charles Schwab like shows up at a manufacturing plant and he finds like it's a little underperforming and he asks, how many units did you guys produce today? And they're like, okay, 5. So with chalk, he writes a giant 5 on the floor. Doesn't say anything. Just writes it and like circles it or whatever. And then the evening shift comes in and he doesn't say it. And they're like, what is that 5 for? And they're like, starts a little buzz. And somebody's like, that's how many units. And the morning shift comes back the next day and their 5 is scribbled out and somebody wrote 7, and now they're in a friendly competition, and the next day it's 15. Now Charles Schwab that's why he's Charles Schwab.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, he also references Frederick Herzberg, which if you remember, we did our motivation episode, talked about the 2-factor theory of motivation.
I mean, I don't remember that, but...
Well, it's the same Herzberg, just a fun fact. But he found that the number one factor that motivates people is the work itself. So, like, people get a lot of satisfaction from doing a good job. And he says, every successful person loves the game, the chance for self-expression, to prove their worth, to excel, to win. And so principle number 12 is throw down a challenge, which actually sounds more modernized. But yeah, just to wrap up this part, I also 100% agree that, like, when in doubt, make it a competition if you want to incentivize something.
Sure.
So true. I've used this so many times as a leader. And it really does. People just love competition. Even if the prize isn't like that great, they just love the competition.
There was a Byzantine leader who saved the city by appealing to the competitive nature of some, I think they're not soccer teams or whatever they were doing, but like the walls. Byzantium was famous for having the thickest, unbeatable walls, and they did not come down for a long time. But at some point there was I think it was like an earthquake or something. I think it was Attila was about to show up, or I can't remember which raiding. And there was not enough time to repair the walls. He appealed to the local sports teams. I don't know. It wasn't soccer, but it was something like that. And he asked the teams themselves to get their fans involved, and we made it a little competition.
Yeah.
And they rebuilt the walls and survived.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So that brings us to part 4, be a leader, how to change people without giving offense or arousing resentment. So, chapter 1, if you must find fault, this is the way to begin.
This is his cookie.
It's not really a cookie. It's just like a Oreo with the top taken off. I don't know. Something like that.
But it's like an Oreo with the top taken off, and the white part, the cream part, is 8 feet thick.
Yeah.
That's probably my cookie a little bit. Like I try and say so many nice things that the few critical things, first of all, you know that they're real because otherwise I wouldn't be telling you. And second of all, I've hopefully built you up so much that they're not destroying your ego or affecting your self-worth, or you think I'm a really crazy. It's like ice cream on top of your cookie.
Pretty much. Yeah, I mean, he says it's easier to listen to unpleasant things after we've heard some praise of our good points. And he actually includes the full, he calls it the second most famous letter Abraham Lincoln ever wrote. He includes the full letter in this chapter. But
the General Hooker was famous for frequenting sex workers and having, so that's where the word hooker comes from. Not the best look for the general of the Union armies. He was incredibly ineffective. They all were until Ulysses S. Grant. The North should have won the Civil War so many times. And it is a study in military incompetence and cowardice. But Abraham Lincoln is patient. And I can't remember which general refuses to. They had a moment where they could have boxed Lee in. He could not have escaped. And is the guy who eventually ran against Lincoln, George McClellan. Famous for his lack of kind of courage but Lincoln then says, if I had seen all the bloody gore and carnage this man has seen, maybe I wouldn't have been quick to attack either. Mm. And he understood his perspective and didn't send this letter, which we only know because it was found in the...
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, found it. I
have heard that.
Yeah, he found the letter that his wife saved, but he didn't send. Yeah.
Well, he prints this particular letter to General Hooker because this was during, as you've noted, the darkest period of the Civil War, April 1863. But Carnegie's point in this is that he notes how Abe Lincoln praises General Hooker for his strengths before naming his faults.
That's smart. Beginning with praise is like the dentist who begins their work with Novocaine.
Yeah, the patient still gets the drilling, but the Novocaine is pain killing. It rhymes.
Oh my God.
like several things in this book. So the principle of this is begin with praise and honest appreciation. I do think that's generally true. I think it depends on your relationship with the person.
I think it's more about the overall relationship than the particular incident. If you've developed a long period of trust with people, then you can tell them directly when something's wrong, and they don't think you're rejecting them. They don't think they're going to get fired. Exactly. They don't lose confidence in themselves. It doesn't become this ginormous event. You've built this foundation of positive reinforcement and supportiveness that they've come to trust you. That's not a one-time thing.
No, and I think a lot of it's, we've done a couple episodes on feedback now, but how you frame it and people in your relationship with them and them feeling like you have their best interests at heart allows you to give more direct feedback. But it is important that your feedback in general be balanced. So I somewhat agree with it.
Yeah.
This is also similar, chapter 2, how to criticize and not be hated for it. There are tactful ways to say what you want. 1 3-letter word destroys that intention, which is the word but.
Doing great, but...
Exactly.
Good grades, Johnny. But...
Yeah. This but is poison. It delivers criticism in the guise of a compliment and subtly cloaks the true meaning of a statement.
Yeah.
And this is so true. I so agree with this. Yep. This is what we talk about, in my work specifically.
I'm sorry if I offended you, but wasn't my intention. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Cool. That's just yeah.
Now I'm angrier.
Yeah. And in improv, we talk about yes and, not yes but.
Oh, right? I used that on you a couple weeks ago.
Yes, you did. I did not like it.
Well, that's because it was accurate. I told her she was doing yes but.
I was like, don't use my own things against me. Yeah, it's okay. He was right, but whatever. But yeah, so he argues that it's more effective to demonstrate what you want rather than verbally criticize your employees. So principle number 2 is call attention to people's mistakes indirectly. And I think, again, this kind of goes into, we've talked about our philosophy on feedback before. I definitely venture more towards direct feedback, but like in the context of a very trusting relationship where you've built that person up a lot, kind of like we just talked about. But I think this note about the word but is very key.
Yes, but. Ouch. I knew I had you. I was like, I know she's not going to be able to argue with this. This is going to be like, she's going to get it. She's going to see how she's wrong.
There will be revenge at some point, I'm sure.
It's terrifying.
Not like that. Also, find some of your own things to use against you. At some
point. Jeez.
I love you. But yeah, so moving into the rest of these. So chapter 3, talk about your own mistakes first.
This is chapter 1300.
Yeah, it's not. It's like it's the 4th chapter.
There's a lot of repeated. Like this book also could have been about at least 2/3 the length.
It could have definitely been shorter.
Just a little bit.
There's some repetition.
Yeah,
absolutely.
The whole gist of it is be kind to people, be supportive, and that's it. But then you got to break it out a little bit for the publishing.
Yeah, so we'll try to move through the rest of these, so we're not here all night. But
one way out.
This one, he talks about how when he had his 19-year-old niece working for him, and when he wanted to call attention to a mistake, he would like talk about his own mistakes at her age first. He says, admitting your own mistakes, even when you haven't yet corrected them, can help convince somebody to change their own behavior. So his principle is talk about your own mistakes before criticizing the other person. I don't think this is necessarily a hard rule. I think it depends on the situation, but this is definitely a tactic that can help.
Sure.
Chapter 4, no one likes to take orders. And this...
Oh my God. Is your name next to this? Kristen does not like to take orders.
That's true. That's very true.
Jesus, it's rough for me.
Yeah, he cites a particular example of O&D Young, founder of RCA, electronics company, almost never gave direct orders. It's like, do this or do that. Instead, he would use phrases like, what do you think of this?
Yeah.
And he gave people the opportunity to do things themselves and let them learn from their mistakes. Talks about resentment caused by a brash order may last a long time.
I'm sorry, Jocko, back to Jocko.
I know.
He talked about that a lot. He's like, I almost never gave an order.
Yeah. This reminds me of both the military books we've done. I think It's Your Ship had some.
Yeah, he didn't give a lot of orders.
Yeah.
Yeah, he showed people the goal. He showed them the vision, and then he asked them what they wanted to do, how they were going to do it. I think there was more like freedom in It's Your Ship. Jocko was still like actually in combat.
Yeah. But
he trained people with such like understanding and decentralized command. He's like, when I was in combat, I didn't say a word.
Oh.
No. They knew what to do.
And Carnegie says, instead, beginning with questions makes an order more palatable and often stimulates the creativity of those you ask as well. Because people are just more likely to accept an order if they've had a part in the decision that caused the order to be issued.
Sure.
So the principle is ask questions instead of giving direct orders. Chapter 5, let the other person save face. This is really important.
So smart.
Yeah, this is really important. He gives an example of how GE like artfully removed a leader that they described as indispensable but highly sensitive from being the head of a department and not running it well. But they gave him a new complimentary title and let somebody else head up the department. And he was happy because he felt like he saved face with it. Carnegie says, so often we ride roughshod over the feelings of others, getting our own way, finding fault, issuing threats without even considering the hurt to the other person's pride. This is what I put another impossible to pronounce French name in here. But a quote from French aviation pioneer and author Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. I speak zero French, you can tell.
No, that sounded perfect.
Yeah. We'll just pretend that pronunciation was better. But
The French are getting pitchforks right now.
Hey, I said I don't speak any French.
No, they believe you.
Wow. The jabs are really coming out now.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that said how to spar people in success, not spur people. I apologize. I got the wrong vibe.
Uh-huh. But anyway, his quote was, "I have no right to say or do anything that diminishes a man in his own eyes. What matters is not what I think of him, but what he thinks of himself.
God, that's so powerful.
Hurting a man in his dignity is a crime." So I think this is especially true when we talk about like when you need to fire or lay people off, let them keep their dignity.
For sure.
Like it's so important. Let the other person save face.
Well, there's goes back to like how a person gets their feeling of importance.
Mm-hmm.
You know, tells you who they are.
Yeah, absolutely.
And okay, yeah.
Yep. So yeah, we're getting towards the finish line. Mike is really excited to still be here.
I feel like I'm in that prison
Oh God.
How many widgets did you produce today?
Oh my God.
I'm going to get shot on the floor. I'm going to get shocked.
What a great dramatization of your point, Mike.
Oh, I speak in allegory.
So yes, chapter 6, how to
6,000.
how to spur people on to success. So he said, animal trainers have been using positive reinforcement to train dogs for like centuries. Why don't we do the same thing? Praising even the slightest improvement inspires a person to keep on improving.
Yep.
And he talks about like looking back on his own life and saying places where a few words of praise sharply changed his entire future. And he notes, this is kind of back to the flattery versus appreciation, like singling out a specific accomplishment. It's much better than just like general flattering remarks. Everybody likes to be praised, but when it's specific, it comes across as sincere, not as something said just to manipulate. And this is also where he notes, like the principles taught in this book will work only when they come from the heart.
That's true.
If we inspire the people with which we come into contact by giving them a realization of the hidden treasures they possess, we can do far more than change people. We can transform them. So this principle summarized is praise the slightest improvement and praise every improvement. Be hearty in your approbation and lavish in your praise.
Yeah.
And then number 7, give a dog a good name. So this comes from the saying, like, give a dog a bad name and you may as well shoot him.
Jeez, that's
Which
aggressive.
Aggressive?
So aggressive.
Very aggressive. Yeah, I don't hear that one much anymore. But basically, this is we respond to what others believe about us. And
Sure.
I think this is so true. Like, if you label a young person as a troublemaker or delinquent, they tend to live up to that reputation.
So I don't remember which book I was reading, but there's actually a lot of study in the way you name a child will determine their long-term success. There's a lot of data behind it.
But yeah, I mean, I think in this case, I think it's true. Like especially when you talk about young people, what they're labeled as is
Sure.
because then they already feel like they've been condemned.
You can ruin their life.
They feel like they have nothing to lose.
Yeah.
Yeah. But where he goes with this is everybody has at least one quality that can be respected and admired. So why not offer people the opportunity to demonstrate their strengths rather than find fault in their weaknesses? And this is where it gets into, this is what you were talking about. If you want someone to develop a particular trait, assume they already have it. Give them a fine reputation to live up to, and they will make efforts to improve.
I had some leaders criticize me for that. They're like, you're not being realistic with them. I was like, okay, I get that. But, I'm trying to help them excel and believe in themselves. It's bit me and that took us a few times, but.
Yeah, I don't think it necessarily works in every case.
It does not.
It's a tactic.
It's a tactic for sure.
Or that you can have like in your tool belt. Last couple short chapters. Number 8, make the fault seem easy to correct.
Kino was really good at that. I remember when I got to that chapter, I was like, this dude is doing that. He's making these giant things that are going to really take me weeks to fix sound easy.
Yeah. And what Dale Carnegie says, if you tell someone they're bad at a certain thing, have no gift for it, or doing it all wrong, you've destroyed almost every incentive they have to try to improve.
Yeah.
So it's like the opposite of that. Be liberal with your encouragement. Make the things seem easy to do. let them know you have faith in their ability to do it. I think that last part is really critical. And then that gives them the incentive to like practice until the dawn comes in order to excel. Whereas if you make it sound like this really hard journey, it's going to be a lot less motivating for them. So I think there's truth there for sure. So principle number 8, use encouragement, make the fault seem easy to correct. And then the very last one is number 9, make people glad to do what you want. So this is like always make the other person happy about doing the thing you suggest. And he says this is a matter of finding a way for others to get something out of helping us, whether it's recognition, appreciation, or a reward for their cooperation. So principles, make the other person happy about doing the thing you suggest.
Good luck.
Give them a reason to do what you want.
That's hard, man.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, that's challenging.
Yeah, no.
That's some subtle kung fu right there.
I think this, like the make them think it was their idea, like there's a lot more.
There's so much to that.
There's an art to
There's
it.
an art to that, for sure.
Yeah, but it could be a whole other book. But yeah, we made it.
Oh, are we done?
We made it to the end of the book.
Okay, Kristen, what didn't resonate?
So, we've talked about some things in individual chapters that didn't necessarily resonate. I think overall, this could be condensed. There's some repetition there. But I think in addition to that, one thing about this book is a lot of the recommendations include some version of like softening or watering down your language. And many people can benefit from doing this. But this book is also written for men in the 1930s. And I think that is reflected there. Women especially have often been socialized to soften our language too much.
That's fair. That's something he talks about in Is it Boundaries for Leaders? Which is Michael Bungay-Stanier.
That's the coaching habit.
The coaching habit. And he talks about, he gives different advice to different people about how they should wield their power.
Yeah.
And where he gives away power for a lot of women or men, he encourages them to exercise their powers in different ways.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I think you have to really consider your own current behavior with language rather than blindly applying these. Because I think a lot of women, we tend to, by default, over-apologize or just add too many qualifiers on our statements to begin with to soften them. And that's not actually always effective. So this isn't necessarily going to blanket apply to everyone. On a side note, like if this is something you struggle with, I thought of a book I read many years ago. It could be completely out of date. I think it's was published in 2001, but it was called How to Say It for Women by Phyllis Mendel. And I just remember it had some really good examples of very specific ways you can make your language stronger and more impactful. So if that's something that you are thinking about for your own communication, you might want to check it out. So what didn't resonate for you, Mike?
Honestly, the book resonates pretty overall. I don't know about the yes part. And people saying, yes, it strikes me nowadays as a little bit manipulative and not super effective. But overall, this is a book about like be kind and supportive to people, and you're going to tap into their positive human nature. So,
for sure.
I also thought, like most books, it could be 1/3 short.
That is our common.
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
Feedback, but
it's okay. But I think some of these are such good advice to give people a reputation to live up to and praise every improvement. So
what was your most life-changing takeaway?
As a very analytical personality, this kind of is the gospel of leaders are more about how you make people feel and how you interact with them on a daily basis than the data and facts that you bring them. Yeah. Charles Schwab, he was not paid for his hard work. He was paid for his smile, for how he made people feel and how he got them to do what he needed them to do. That's life-changing for me. People are not swayed by, again, Martin Luther King had a dream, not a plan. So for me, that's a kind of paradigm shift.
For sure.
And I think this book was a real like icing on the cake of understanding that. Yeah.
Nice. But you clearly remember it very well.
10 times, bro.
You brought up many things that were not in my notes. So, yeah.
It's just what stuck with me, you know. And I do come back to this book a lot. But check out the audiobook. What was your most life-changing takeaway?
I find it really hard to choose one. I think there are a couple things that stick out. I think especially what you were saying, like the framing when you're like trying to influence people, like really framing it around them and what benefits them is like, I know this on an intellectual level.
It's so hard to do, though.
But it's hard to do.
Yeah.
And there's various other things in here that I've called out are not my strengths. So, but I think I also just found it really cool to see a lot of principles like around listening and understanding the other person's perspective. Like these are just very core to the work that I do with bringing in improv principles to leadership development. And it was cool to see them emphasized like 90 years ago.
Yep.
So.
Very cool. Great book.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Should be one of your like top 10 leadership toolkit books.
Yeah, when I think, as you've noted, it's one you can keep coming back to also.
Yeah. It's just a very cohesive message. Core principles.
Definitely.
Serve you well.
Very concisely summarized.
Very concisely summarized, even though it's long.
Yeah, it's long, but the principles are very easy to take away from it. So
good luck applying them, though. It's
some of them need a lot more explanation.
Some of them need a lot of work. A lot of work.
But yeah.
All right, we'll come back to that.
We will.
Chris Voss, in his current Instagram feed, says, it doesn't need to be perfect. So on that note, this is our submission for imperfection and, you know, how to win friends and influence people.
Yep. There we go. Well, thank you guys for listening. That concludes our LBC on how to win friends and influence people. And we will see you guys next time.
Thank you.
The Love and Leadership podcast is produced and co-hosted by me, Kristen Sharkey, and co-hosted by Mike Sharkey. Please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. We can't stress enough just how much these reviews help. You can follow us on LinkedIn under Kristen Sharkey and Michael Sharkey, and on Instagram as Love Leader Pod. You can also find more information on our website, loveandleadershippod.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.